I am now at a place where I realize the clarity that a father's the only man on the face of the earth who rejoices when another man, i.e. his son, exceeds his accomplishments in life. I'm 61 and both of those boys have exceeded anything I've ever accomplished. That's the greatest privilege. Kids spell love T-I-M-E.
What's up, everybody? Pastor Nate here with the Under God podcast. We've given you 3 great episodes with Pastor Rob McCoy, and when we were recording the one that you've just listened to previously around the table, Pastor Stephen asked Pastor Rob a great question about raising kids and building the life that you want and that God has for you. And the one answer to that question turned into a podcast episode all by itself that we wanted to give to you. We know that this is going to bless you, enrich you, and encourage you. Men especially, there's some great information here for how you raise up your kids, how to train up your boys to become great men of God, how to train up your daughters to be great women of God, and maybe unconventional, but how you find the right spouse and how important that is. So we're going to dive into this episode and hear some great wisdom from Pastor Rob McCoy on the Under God podcast. Here we go.
So we've talked to the pastors. One of the things that I'm noticing in our church, nearly 1,500 people up, most of them are young men, 18 to 30 years old. And when I think about that, first of all, I'm not 18 to 30 anymore. I'm 41, but you're a pastor in my life. And as I look at your family, as I look at your kids, as I even look at like the impact you've had on Charlie, but even just more than that, it seems to be just you have a wake of young, strong men. I mean, you just handed off, Godspeak to an incredible pastor, Micah, somebody you discipled, and he's doing absolutely incredible. I think what I'd like to do for the next few moments is just talk about how in the world did you do that? Will you write us a manual so we can move forward?
Great question.
Well, you've already accomplished, Stephen, the hardest part of all that. You got to marry well.
I married very well.
He did. Kyla's amazing. And Michelle is amazing, my wife. Well, I raise daughters differently than I raise sons. I obviously I don't just talk about discipleship, I apply it. I'm a little bit different in my discipleship in that things are caught, not taught. And so when I'm discipling somebody, I bring them with me. You can see I had Joey with me, and so I bring them with me. Observe me and follow me as I follow Christ. And then in those times where they observe me, they're going to have questions, and I'll answer them. I'm not super great at systematic studies, although I was, not personally I do when I teach, but, sitting down, hey, once a week, we're going to sit down and we're going to go through, I don't do that well. And I just know how God's wired me. And I love to teach like I learn. So life, Jesus used parables, and life is a story. And I want them to observe my life, and that's the best thing to do. And then from that earthly illustration, I give them a heavenly truth, how it applies to Scripture and why I do what I do. What's the why and what I do? So I was discipled through the Navigator study. And I'd become a Christian in college. I had never read a book cover to cover. I was dumber than a box of rocks. Because I was an athlete. So I was just always training. And I got an athletic scholarship. I went to Tulane first. I did terrible academically and left there, and then ended up at a community college where I was getting my NC2A eligibility back and, did whatever I needed to do. Community college was kind of like a high school with ashtrays. and then I got another scholarship. I swam at San Diego Mesa, and I still have the records there, and they still have a swim team. I was a good swimmer, and I got another scholarship to Fresno State. I hold records there. They've gotten rid of men's swimming. That's why my records still remain. But in my senior year, I came to the Lord, and it was profound. And my roommate and I, he was from Madera, and there was the college or the young adults minister. He was a cotton farmer, married, 3 kids. And he would drive from Madera to Fresno to take us through the Navigator study every Thursday. And if you didn't do the study, he'd leave. And he goes, I'm not coming back till it's done. Do your study. So we do our studies, and sometimes it'd be like just finishing it before he gets there. I was a procrastinator par excellence. But then we'd sit and I'd glean from him. And it was just simply asking questions. So this is the part I love the most, was not the answers. Those were just launching points for our conversations. But I admired his wife, and I saw what an amazing woman she was. I mean, he's a cotton farmer. He's a Bible study guy. His kids are great. He had 3 kids at the time, and they were well behaved. His house was in order. He was pleasant. His interactions with his wife were sweet. But I marveled at her, and I said, I wanted that. When I saw her, I always thought to myself, that's the kind of woman I want to marry someday. So things are caught, not taught. I'm observing things, and I'm watching a family I admire, and so I'm discipled. Well, I graduate, and I always said I was a moral pagan, but I was an immoral Christian, because I was always in athletics, and I was too tired to get in trouble. And plus I was just naive. But now I'm graduating from college. I got a job. I got money in my pocket. I got a company car. I got time on my hands, and I'm my own guy. And I started sowing to the flesh and realized this is good. So I end up getting a promotion, and I was in Southern California. It brings me back to the San Joaquin Valley, and I end up at that church. I wanted to get reconnected with the Lord, and I went to the young adults, and while I'm there, I meet another girl. She was Hispanic, and we started dating, and then it went south quickly. The flesh just was bad, and we both got involved, and it was inappropriate, and it was at the 4th of July picnic at this church. And we both said, look, we got to call this off. We want to pursue the Lord. This is wrong. And you can't hold a hot coal in your lap and not get burned. And we just knew we needed to distance ourselves. And I was pursuing and pressing in the Lord. And she came to me a couple weeks later and says, I'm pregnant. I'm like, oh, man. So I went and told the pastor. And he said, you need to get married before she's showing. The church had grace in its name, and I always thought any church that has grace in its name doesn't usually possess it in the building. It's the sweetest group of people. I was just joking, but that was a little legalistic, like get married because she'll be showing, and you don't want that. Avoid the appearance of evil. Well, it's already there, and I don't have to be ashamed of it. I own it. I mean, and my parents weren't Christians. I told my dad I'd become a Christian, and I remember he said, get that Jesus crap out of my house. And I never read the Bible at home. I don't remember ever praying with my family. We were going to church. And now born and raised in Coronado, and my parents were up in Sacramento because my dad had taken over a series. He was a vice president for a bank after his military career, and a series of branches that were struggling, and he's up there. So I go from Fresno up to Sacramento to meet with him and tell him my girlfriend's pregnant and we're getting married. My parents were a little bit prejudiced. My brother married a Guatemalan woman, and I was like the last great white hope. and so I sit down. It was their cocktail hour. They'd have a martini every night, and it was kind of cool because they'd always talk. As long as they were married almost 60 years, they always had an evening together. And they go, "Why are you here?" And I say, "Well, my girlfriend's pregnant. We're getting married." And my mom screamed, and my dad said, "Luis, calm down." And you've heard the story, and I don't want to belabor it, but my dad just said, "Look, son," and he was giving me the best advice he could without knowing the Lord. He said, "Look, I'm sure you care about this woman. You don't need to be married now. You're not ready for that. You don't need to be a dad. You're not ready for that. Just have her get an abortion. You guys can keep dating." I go, "Dad, I can't do that. It's against what I believe in." And he goes, "Son, look where your beliefs have gotten you so far." And I'm like, "Dad, that's not God's fault. That's my fault. I'm not following up one mistake with another one." He goes, "It's not a baby." And I just finished the Greg Koukl kind of stand to reason. I could defend the unborn with those SLED acronym: size, level of development, environment, degree of dependency. And my dad couldn't contend with me. And he was a gentle man, and I'd never seen him do this before. He goes, "Stop." And he says, "Let me make something clear. You marry that woman and give birth to that child, you will never step foot in this house again." And that was stunning to me. That wasn't like my dad. And I go, "Are you serious?" And he goes, "I couldn't be more serious." And I look over at my mom, and she's nodding, and yes. And my hands were shaking, my lips were quivering, my heart was racing. I was sweating. And I was in my early 20s. I remember just looking at him. I said, "I love you guys. I'm going to miss you." And I got up and I walked out. And they were true to their word. I was cut off. And now I don't have any friends. I'm a penny looking for change. I go back to Fresno, and now I got to tell the guy who discipled me, led me to the Lord, discipled me. I got to go tell him what I've done. So I'm owning it. And we go up to Dinky Creek in the Sierras to go fishing. We get up there, and I just break the news to him. And it was so awkward. I could just tell he was crushed. And he goes, let's get in the car. Let's go back. And we drove down. We probably said 10 words the whole drive down. And now I don't even have him as a friend. So I take my fiance now, and I go up to Hume Lake to go to a Christian concert just to get away. I don't have any friends, just her. And we're coming down, and she asks me to pull the car over. So I pull the car over, and she takes off her engagement ring, and she puts it up on the dashboard, and she says, I have to tell you something. I'm like, what? And she said, I slept with Steve. Don't just say, throw a name out. Well, that happened to be the guy who led me to the Lord, discipled me, married, and 3 kids. Like my
wow,
earthly hero.
This is the guy you had the cold car ride with.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow.
And I'm devastated. And I can't process it.
Mm.
And I tell her, I go, look, I wish I'd known that before I talked to my parents. And you knew this. And I said, so I'm not building this life together on a lie. We're not getting married, but I'll take care of the baby. I knew it was mine. And back in the early 80s, you couldn't do the paternity test without endangering the baby. So we had to wait till after the baby was born. So now I don't have anybody. And I actually want to take my life.
Mm.
For those of you out there, suicide is worthless. Don't do it. But I knew the hairpin turn on the drive to the coast where my accounts were. And I was listening to a comedy CD or tape, I can't remember. And I was laughing, and I missed the turn. And I told that comedian years later when I'd run into him, he was a comedian of the year, hilarious guy, that story. And he's recently come to Christ. So I get a phone call on my birthday from a girl that I had met 4 years earlier that I always carried a picture of on my wall. The only girl I ever carried a picture of. She always had a boyfriend, always had a girlfriend. We never dated, but she reminded me so much of the wife of this guy. And her laugh was contagious. And she lived up in Northern California. She would come down to Coronado to visit her grandparents and her aunt and her uncle. And she would call me on my birthday, just wish me a happy birthday because she was a friend. She wasn't a Christian. When I became a Christian, I told her she didn't know really what to make of it. And now she's at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. She's come to Christ through the Campus Crusade Ministries. And that's part of my territory, the Central Coast. And she called me and wished me a happy birthday. And I'm like, oh, I got some news for you. And I told her, I go, I was dating a gal, got her pregnant. We were going to get married. And then I'm thinking she's done. And I love the definition of a friend that when the whole world goes out, they come in. And that was this girl. And she was my friend through all the pregnancy of my ex-fiance. The baby's born. And I go over there and have lunch with her, and we'd laugh and talk. I had a friend. And we talk about the Lord. Now the baby's born, they take the blood test. It's that guy's blood. I mean, it's that guy's blood. It's that guy's baby.
Wow.
He doesn't believe it. I kind of don't believe it. His wife doesn't believe it, and my ex-fiance does not believe it. We take another blood test, conclusively his. And so I called this gal, and I said, look, I don't know what you're doing this weekend. You want to come over to Fresno? And she's like, yeah, come over. And I find the best place I can in Fresno on a ranch with a weeping willow tree on a man-made lake. And I just said, look, I don't know what you're doing for the next 60 or 70 years, but I'd like to do it with you. Would you marry me? And she's like, yeah. So now I got to call my mom and dad, and I haven't talked to in months. My mom answers the phone. Why are you calling? I said, I'm getting married. I thought you already were married. And I'm like, long story. Well, who are you marrying this time? And I go, her name is Meterise Coletti, but she goes by her middle name, Michelle. No one's ever heard the name Meterise. So I go, yeah, well, you know Meterise? She says, yes, I know Meterise. Oh, well, Meterise who? She says, Meterise Fowler. I go, well, that's Michelle's grandmother. And my mom goes, you're marrying Admiral Richard Fowler's granddaughter? Meterise Fowler's husband's, I'm like, yeah. And my mom was like, she was probably thrilled on the other end of the line. And she says, Rob, Med, which is short for Meterise, Med Fowler was at your baby shower before you were born. I'm like, no. She goes, yeah. she was best friends with your godmother, Lois Early, and my godfather was best friends with Michelle's grandfather. My godfather's Rear Admiral Robert Early. I'm named after him, Robert McCoy. He was best friends with Dick Fowler, who was a Navy admiral and a hero. He's buried at Arlington. So fast forward, my mom came to Christ because my siblings are older than I am by 7 years. There's 3 of them, and they're a planet, and I'm a moon that revolves around them. And the gap was my mom had 2 abortions when she was in Japan.
Wow.
And she had confided when I walked out of the house to a Catholic priest, Father Murphy, Michael Murphy, and gave her heart to the Lord. My dad followed suit and became a believer. And then now my dad's in a home with Alzheimer's. My mom had surgery for lung cancer because she smoked like a chimney most of her life. And she'd had surgery in her late 80s, and we weren't sure if it was going to work. And I went in to visit her in the hospital, and in that moment, she said, "Rob, I have to tell you something." I said, "What, Mom?" She said, "Do you remember when I told you that Med Fowler was at your baby shower with your godmother, Lois Early?" I go, "Yeah." She said, "Well, I never told you the whole story." I said, "What is it?" And she said, "When I found out I was pregnant with you, I didn't think I could have any more children, and your father didn't want any more. I knew where to do it in Japan, but I had no idea in San Diego, and I confided in the commanding officer's wife, my godmother, Lois Early. Admiral Early was my dad's commanding officer, and the Navy wives were tight back then. And she said, I confided in Lois where one would obtain an abortion in San Diego in late 63. And Lois said to me, Louise, let me investigate that and I'll get back to you. And without my mom's permission, she got together with her best friend, Med Fowler, and they put on a baby shower and announced it to the command and basically saved my life. And I got to lead Lois to the Lord before she died and reconfirm Med's faith before she died. And I just thought, I learned so much. And this is, you were asking about raising kids, and it's a long story, but it'll make sense, Stephen. I learned from that man, Steve, a man is not someone who has an inability to make mistakes. It's what he does after he makes mistakes. He owned it. He stayed married to his wife. He raised that child. I met that gal later in life. She's walking with the Lord. My ex-fiance is walking with the Lord. The 3 kids that he raised, including the one that's their half sister, are all walking with the Lord. One in particular, I could tell you who it was, but I don't want to without their permission, is one of the most amazing authors who was significant in my life during COVID because of their investigative work they did, and we're dear friends to this day. That man, everything he taught me, even though it was a flawed human being who did it, is still the things I use because he discipled me. And he discipled me even in a flawed life by showing me what to do when you fail. And so when I had kids, I married a woman like his wife who loves the Lord and never left him and never saw who he was, but who he is to become. She was his greatest fan. Mm-hmm. And she wasn't a pushover. She was an iron fist and a velvet glove. And so Michelle and I raised our children in transparency. And when I was wrong, I'd tell them I was wrong, and I would make good on it and show them it's not, a man isn't someone with an inability to make mistakes, but what he does after he makes mistakes. I never push my kids to go into my ministry or fulfill my dreams. I encourage them to be who God had wired them to be. Daughters, I realized as I watched daughters, the best way you can raise a daughter is to love their mother and show them how the right way a man is to treat a woman. And they grew up with that. They're 2 of my 3 are married and they're powerhouses, and the husbands they married, if I could have picked my kids' spouses, I would have picked both those guys. And they're both serving in ministry. Boys are different. Boys, there's a transition. You got to push them to be men. A daughter, they look at you like you're bigger than life. You're their hero. You're their daddy. And then one day, the way they're looking at you, they're no longer looking at you that way. They're looking at that other guy, and you're looking at him going, why are you looking at him? You're supposed to be looking, but then you realize I'm getting older and I'm to be a provider and a protector. And I see in that man a younger version of what I'm desiring to do. And he loves her. And so my favorite part of the a Western traditional marriage ceremony is the giving away of the bride, because the dad's saying, I have provided and protected her, and now I'm entrusting you as I prepare to step off this earth. And it's awesome. And so that was always in my mind. But with my sons, I had to make them providers and protectors. I had to push them. And I did something, and I don't know if we're going too long.
We're not at all.
No, this is great.
I'll just close with this. I did something with the boys that I didn't do with the girls. I took them on a walkabout. Now, no one knows what it is. It was a download the Lord gave me as I was praying, because I saw them growing up, and Lord, I don't want them to fail like I did. I want them to have the best of my dad, but I want them to have the best of your word. It's like generational sanctification. I want to honor my father in front of them and my grandfather, and I want to bless them. And Lord, show me what to do. If any man lacks wisdom, he need but ask of you. And I was praying, I was journaling, because the Lord had shown me in Psalm 127 that my sons would be as olive shoots around my table. And I wanted them to succeed. And I didn't want them to struggle in the areas I did. But I didn't want a helicopter parent. And I didn't want them to follow in my footsteps if that wasn't what they were called to do. And so I prayed, and the Lord gave me this download. And it was a lot like a bar mitzvah, as I had come to realize that there aren't teenagers in Hebrew culture. There's children and there's adults. And at 13, you become responsible for the law, the moral law, and you're an adult. And so I've said, okay, on 13th birthday, I'm going to do this with my boys. And I wrote it down. It was almost a download. And I said, okay, Michelle, you're going to be with the girls. I'm going to call the boy out from the house. And then I'm going to take him for the day and introduce him to the world of manhood. So I say, okay, come on, let's go, boy. Today you become a man. Like, they're prepared for this. I get him in the car, and the first place I drive to is a cemetery. And it's mysterious. They're like, what are you doing, Dad? I just walk with me. We're walking through the row and row of tombstones. And we get to a tombstone that was a friend of mine who was my exact age, who they knew him. I'd buried him. He was a dear friend. He died of cancer. And oh, Dad, this is Mr. Gainsley's tombstone. I go, yeah. Why are we here, Dad? I said, well, first of all, every great journey begins with the end in mind. That's Bob Gainsley's end on this earth. His remains are here. I said, what do you observe about the cemetery? Well, there's nobody here. The scripture says, as are the flowers of the field, here today, gone tomorrow, be remembered no more. I said, what else do you see? He said, well, what do you observe on the tombstone? I see a name. Yeah. Ecclesiastes 7:1 says, a good name is like a precious fragrance, but better is the day of a man's death than the day of his birth. Robert Gainsley was given a name, and that, as you know, that name is a fragrance to me. I've been drawn to his tombstone to remember him fondly, and you know how I felt about him. His name is a fragrance to me, as Solomon wrote. Now, you were given a name when you were born, and for Daniel, it was Daniel Robert Christian McCoy, and Michael Thomas McCoy. And whether that name is going to be a fragrance or a stench is going to be dependent on how you front load your life and how you live. Because today you are accountable. You're a man. You're responsible for what fragrance your name is going to have to the future that you're giving. The Bible says that children, you're my sons, children are a blessing from the Lord. Blessed is a man whose quiver is full. That's an offensive arrow. I want to make you straight and true and shoot you into a future I won't be able to be a part of, so that you can affect that future for truth. And I have them recite to me. I said, what's the prayer I've prayed over you ever since you can remember? And they go, well, you say, Lord, thank you for my son. Give him a supernatural love for your word, a heart to proclaim it, protect his purity and his innocence, make him mighty in his generation for declaring your truths. And Lord, wherever she is tonight, I pray your blessing upon his future wife, that she too would be raised in love and the admonition of the Lord. She'd have a supernatural love for your word, and together they would serve you all the days of their life and contend for truth, that for generations their children and grandchildren would proclaim the name of the Lord. And they would recite it. They know it. They're going to do it with their kids. They had me write it down. And then I said, to Thomas Jefferson, I said earlier, freedom is having choices. You're going to front load your life, and the more you study and the more you equip your life, the more choices you're going to have to be a provider and a protector for your family. I asked them, what is money? And they go, it's the stuff you buy things with. I said, no, money is a representation of your contribution to society. The more you contribute, the more you'll make. Now, in the ministry, my contribution is service. They don't value that a lot. And my compensation has to be formulated in a different way. But in a service-oriented capitalistic culture, it takes 10 years to become a doctor. It takes 3 hours to be a burger flipper. One we pay a lot and the other we don't pay the same. The greater the contribution, the greater the world will pay for that. And it gives you more options. So that's why you study. That's why you want to be equipped. And you're going to want to be equipped in every area. University is unified diversity. You study all the different areas of life, and it's unified in the sole purpose of glorifying God. So equip yourself. This is your responsibility today. And then I took him to the hospital where the babies are born. I said, look, you got the equipment to make a baby, but that doesn't make you a father. A father's a provider and a protector. And I say, recount some areas where you've learned that, and they would do it. And then I took them to the church, and I surrounded them in a circle with men who were my friends who spoke into my life. And I systematically went around the circle, and I'd say, this is my friend Nate, and the reason why I've chosen for him to be here to speak, and the reason why he's so important in my life. And I go through all of your characteristics that are such a blessing, and how you stood, and why you are a provider and a protector, and why you're courageous. And I showed him all those things in this man's life and why it inspires me. And then I go to this guy. And what was cool is you had guys of great wealth. You had guys that, were landscapers, but they were all men of content and all men of character. And they had all significantly affected my life. And unscripted, each of them then in reverse started talking to my son about why they became my friend. So it's honoring his father in his presence. And then at the end, we said, do you have any questions? And each of them asked profound questions. And then we said, okay, let's vote on it as you welcome into the world of manhood. And then and then we prayed for him. And I said, I got a gift for you. And I had prayed over what gift to give my boys. So my son, Daniel, I gave him my father's command sword that was given to me. I just knew the Lord wanted me to do it. I gave him a command sword. When Michael turned 13, I gave him my autograph of Ronald Reagan. Best wishes, Robert McCoy, Ronald Reagan. I gave that to him. Really prized possession for him. I remember meeting him. It was profound. The power of a father's words, I just want men to know this. The command sword I gave my son, Daniel, today he's a military officer. And he's really good at it. Every fit rep, you see it. This guy's stellar. Michael, he's the strongest political operative out there at 24 years of age. I mean, he's Charlie's chief of staff. And he knows everybody. And I am now at a place where I realize the clarity that a father's the only man on the face of the earth who rejoices when another man, i.e. his son, exceeds his accomplishments in life. I'm 61 and both of those boys have exceeded anything I've ever accomplished. That's the greatest privilege. Kids spell love Time. And the only thing you're going to give an account of when you leave this earth, you've been entrusted as stewards of their lives. And if God has called you to be a helpmate and he has given to you a wife, that's his daughter. And you'll be judged on how you cared for her. Did you bathe her in the water of the word? Did you dwell with her with understanding? And all that's discipleship of the greatest form. I mean, we love to do crusades, but if every family had a full quiver, 5 kids, and took time that they could observe your life by the way you lived, and all my kids will tell you this, they would get up and they would see me at 5 to 7 in the morning reading my Bible. I'll close with this last part. Psalm 131. My eyes are not haughty. No, my eyes are not lofty, nor is my heart haughty, but I have calmed and quieted my soul like a weaned child is my soul within me. O Israel, hope in the Lord from this day forward and forevermore. That passage came to me in a profound way when Michael, he was Michelle's largest baby. All of her babies were over 9 pounds. Michael was over 10. And this kid was ravenous. And I would come home from a full day of work. The house is chaotic. And I hadn't had any meaningful time with my son. and it'd be time for him to go down. I'd just come back from an elders meeting or something. And Michelle would say, hold him. I got to get his diaper ready and his night clothes ready, and I got to get ready to feed him. And he's starving because he's ravenous. He's hugantic as a baby. And he just ate like a monster. And so I'm holding him, and he is just irritated. He's wriggling. He's upset. He's crying. This is the only interaction I get with him the whole day. And I'm like, man, son, I don't have anything for you that you want, but I sure would like to spend time with you. And you're being a little irritating. And I didn't enjoy it. And Michelle would go, okay, I'm ready. And I'd bring him in, and she'd change his clothes and get him all set, and then latch him on, and he'd get, milk drunk, and just eyes would roll back in his head. And she'd get this quiet moment with him, and then lay him down. And then I'd walk in and pray for him. And then I'd go out. And I didn't like that. Well, then fast forward, he's 2 years old. He was the kid that was up every morning before I was. And they knew, do not disturb me between 5 and 7. And he'd get up, and he'd walk in, and he'd come, and I'd see him, and I'm like, don't you interrupt your dad. And I'd have my Bible out. He would crawl under my arm and just lay down while I was reading.
Wow.
Like a weaned child, calm and quiet your soul like a weaned child is my soul within me. And the Lord showed me as I'm reading that, I just got moved by it. He had an agenda. He wanted something, and he was agitated. This boy doesn't want anything but to sit in the Father's lap. And I think as believers, we need to come to a place where we just want to sit and be in his presence. And we always have an agenda. We want something from him. We're irritated and agitated. I got good kids. And listen, you don't get to pick the parents you get in this world, but you can choose the kind of parent you're going to be. I had good parents. They weren't believers, but doggone it, they did the best they could. And you honor them. Churchill's father he died of syphilis, and he was a womanizer. He was awful. And his mother was even worse. But he never said anything disparaging about his parents. He said his greatest regret was that he couldn't serve in Parliament with Randolph Churchill. Reagan's father was a wayward Catholic, and he was a drunk. And he'd have to drag him in from the snow so he wouldn't freeze to death. And he never stayed in a home very long because he couldn't hold down a job. Nell, his mother, was a godly woman and took him to church and Sunday school, but Reagan never spoke poorly about his dad. Look, you can't hold your parents responsible for the misery in your life, because we got a good Heavenly Father who will walk us through this. And if you can't say anything nice about your parents, just simply say, they taught me what not to do. And move on.
That's so good.
Don't be bitter.
Wow. Well, man, we could go literally another hour. It's just like, you just, it's so valuable to surround yourself with believers who have walked roads so that we can learn from their mistakes, learn from their wisdom. And Pastor Rob, you're a gift to me personally. Certainly a gift to our church and really the body of Christ. Thank you for just investing in me and Pastor Nate and our entire audience.
Wow. Yeah.
Your gift to me, both you guys, in this fellowship, freest place in Texas.
It is. I'll take it. Thank you.
Well, it's been great to have you on for a couple of episodes today, and you have blessed our church tremendously. Not just one, but all three. We had so many people here from all three of our locations Sunday night with you, and so thank you for all your time, investment in Vintage Church and Vintage in the Under God podcast today. I know our listeners have been blessed. If you were listening on fast speed to this, I hope you slowed it down and really took it in, because there was a lot there. This is probably one to listen to twice. So much wisdom. We really do appreciate it. Any final words? You want to close this out?
Nope, I'm good. Until next time on the Under God podcast.
Thank you for joining us today on the Under God podcast. If this episode encouraged you, share it with a friend or family member. Your support helps us reach more people with God's Word. Be sure to subscribe on YouTube, Rumble, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and at undergodpodcast.com so that you never miss an episode. Follow us on Instagram, Facebook, X, True Social, and TikTok for more content, behind-the-scenes moments, and faith-filled encouragement throughout the week. We want to hear from you. Leave a comment, join the conversation, and send us your questions. We will be answering them in upcoming Q&A episodes. Until next time, remember to think biblically about the things that matter most.